They say the first drag race took place the moment the second car was invented. Since then, innovation, perseverance, and courage have driven nearly every aspect of the sport. The International Drag Racing Hall of Fame honors those who've made the biggest impact. And tonight, a new group takes their place among racing legends. Hello and welcome to the induction for the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame. I'm Dave Dobson, and being here is like being at drag racing fantasy camp. We've got legends who are the foundation of the sport and stars of today that have made the sport what it is. They're all here for one reason, and that's to honor the class of 2018. And to meet the first member of that class, let's go to Ocala, Florida, to the greatest drag racer of all time, Big Daddy Don Garlits.
Our first inductee is Jeb Allen, who has the distinction of being the youngest driver to ever win a national event or a world championship at the tender age of 17. Never drove any other kind of car, just jumped into a fuel dragster and away he went. Jeb Allen, welcome to the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
I never wanted to drive a front engine car. It scared me. Don Garlits came out with this rear engine car, and all I can remember is him pulling each glove, pulling the brake, and staging that car, and I said, that's what I want to be. I want to be Don Garlits Jr.
I guess his mom brought him out to a race when he was 8 years old. He fell in love with it. Ended up being the youngest Top Fuel NHRA winner in the history of the sport. In '81, Jeb won the world championship. Jeb was very successful, fell on some hard times with sponsors and such, stepped out and away from the sport for a lot of years. And it really shocks me that this guy, Jeb Allen, now finishes a home every 3 days. Builds and finishes a home every 3 days.
I was able to experience something that I never felt before, and that was the power of giving. We got involved in the Make-A-Wish Foundation and got to feel a feeling like the one we feel today of winning this trophy and being inducted into the Hall of Fame, which has been my lifelong dream. So I'd like to thank everybody involved, and I hope you have a good evening.
Our next inductee is Jim Otte. He cut his teeth on cars just like this with superchargers. He loves superchargers. But when IHRA introduced Pro Mod, that's when Jim Otte really shined, because he loved blown alcohol, and he got a Corvette. He painted it black, and he called it the Black Mariah because he won so many races. In fact, he was almost unbeatable with that car. And so that is the reason that Jim Otte is going into the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
He started off with a 1936 Chevrolet in 1959. He dominated the A, B, and C gas classes all the way through the 1970s, at which point KS Tiger Pittman showed him the ropes of the supercharged gas class, but by 1970, the funny car had almost erased them from the drag racing map. So Jim decided, I guess I better get a funny car. His first run ever in this funny car, the windshield decided to collapse, which hung the throttle open. So, of course, the engine exploded and kicked all the rods out. As soon as it kicked the rods out, it blew the supercharger off, which actually fixed the stuck throttle problem because it took the windshield with it. At that point, Jim pulled the parachutes ripped off the car. He decided to downshift the car to get it into a lower gear. Well, that succeeded in blowing the gears out of the transmission. So at that point, he put it in reverse, and that actually blew the transmission right out of the car. The car eventually came to a stop, and all that was really left to rescue was the bare chassis. At which point, Jim said, you know, maybe it's time to start a family. After about 10 or 15 years of doing nothing, Jim decided to get into the street rod scene. So he built a small block Chevrolet-powered Chevette. But he said, you know, it'd be really cool if I put a big block Chevrolet in it. What about a supercharger, just like the old days of my AA gas coupe cars? And in the early 1980s, he put the car on its roof on a burnout. And he brought in Fred Hahn. When Ted Jones created the Pro Modified class in 1990, These guys immediately went to the top and, in fact, started touring nationally, just like the old AA gas supercharger days, where they won world championships in the IHRA, in the Super Chevy shows, in the USSC. And then when the National Hot Rod Association said, hey, let's get involved in this class, they jumped into that as well. Jim Otte may seem like a nice guy, he may seem soft-spoken, he may seem humble, but in fact, Jim Otte's single biggest motivating force is the ultimate and total humiliation of every other human being in his class. His wife, Charlene, asked me to say the following: Jim, I love you more than life itself. You are my hero. I will be with you forever.
How do I top that deal? God almighty. To me, this is the biggest award a drag racer could ever receive. When they called me about this deal, I thought they had the wrong number. And my dad, before he left us, he just taught me that with your two hands, you could build anything you want to build, as long as you want to do the work and you never give up. And that's what got me here almost 60 years later. Thank you.
When we come back, the man whose invention has started every drag race for over half a century.
Our next inductee is Ollie Riley, and he could be credited with a lot of contributions to our sport. Riley came up with what we call today the Christmas tree, the top light stage, the car, and then this is where you had to be when you parked to get the actual accurate time. That put the cars in exactly the right spot every time, and then the Christmas tree blinked down and you leave on the green. This gave a very accurate start, made the races very competitive, made it much fair. A major contribution to our sport to make it what it is today. Congratulations to Ollie Riley.
Ollie started the Crondeck timing system, and it's a timing system that literally transformed drag racing. Imagine that you're Wally Parks, it's 1955, you're gonna have your first national event. There's tracks, there's timing systems, and there's asterisks next to a lot of those runs. People are crying foul when they see runs on the East Coast that are 2/10 quicker, and they're popcorn timers, and those don't count. And they literally had gas station air hoses as the finish line of some of these tracks. And Wally said we have to have a standardized timing system. We have to be above skepticism and criticism for all of our runs at our first nationals. There is only one timing company that was there in 1955 in Great Bend, and that was Crondeck, and they became the absolute standard for the industry and took NHRA drag racing to a level that it just kept accelerating and accelerating, pardon the pun.
When you went to certain tracks, if you didn't know, if you weren't friends with the timer or the starter, you know, that cost you a few seconds or whatever, you know, it just, the guy had to use his best judgment, and if he knew you, it's good for a few tenths or whatever. And so, you know, my dad wouldn't allow that. It had to be perfect.
My dad said, you know, when I started that company and your mom and I talked about taking our life savings, $2,000, and betting that all on building the company, that was a big step for them. And it worked out to the benefit of everyone, them as well as you. Thank you very much for honoring my father for this.
You know, here in the East, we have the Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing. And in California, they have the Wally Parks Motorsports Museum. And Gregg Sharpe is the curator of that museum. And he has a wealth of information in his head about drag racing. Even I give him a call and say, who is this guy, or where can I find him? And almost always he can come up with the answer. He loves history just like I love it. And so it's with great pleasure that I introduce Gregg Sharpe into the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
When you look at the broad base of the inductees here tonight, it's only fitting that someone like Gregg would be inducted into the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame. He's often been called the go-to guy for anything you want to know about drag racing and about hot rodding. And when it comes to those two things, Gregg Sharpe really is the man. I mean, I have to admit that when I talk drag racing with Gregg, I don't know if I'm impressed or depressed, or a little bit of both, because when it comes to drag racing knowledge, Gregg's playing Jeopardy, and the rest of us are playing Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? He's written articles literally about all the greats in motorsports, not just from drag racing, but from all forms of motorsports. And he used a lot of his own personal photos for those articles and produced a treasure trove of information about the men, the women, the machines, and what they've done to contribute to this sport, and helped coin the phrase Cacklefest after Steve Gibbs came up with the idea of something that has now become an integral part of the hot rod reunions and, yes, the sport of drag racing itself.
It was a little over a week ago that my phone rang, and it was Gregg. And I could tell immediately that he was gutted about something. And I said, "What's up?" He said, "My doctor said I'm on the no-fly list. I got pneumonia, and he said it could kill me. And missing this could probably kill me too. But I'd appreciate it if you would express some words for me. I deeply regret that pneumonia has precluded my being with you this evening. I look forward to many more years of continuing to honor and preserve your accomplishments. In closing, I'd like to quote the late Jack Benny, who once said, 'I don't deserve this award, but I have arthritis, and I don't deserve that either.'"
Don't go anywhere. Still lots more to come from the induction ceremony for the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
Our next inductee is Kelly Brown. Now, Kelly Brown was a movie stunt driver. He did that for many, many years, but his hobby was top fuel drag racing, and this was his favorite brand of engine. This is an aluminum version of a 392 that was made by Chrysler in 57 and 58. Kelly won the NHRA World Championships with this engine, and I finished number 2. They were singing this little song in the pits. It was so cute. Brown was 1 and Garlitz was 2, but nobody bought a 392. So welcome to the Hall of Fame, Kelly Brown.
Don Garlitz called Brown one of the finest pure drivers I've ever seen. 1978 and 79, Kelly won 8 national events. He won the NHRA World Championship, Driver of the Year, Person of the Year by Carcraft magazine, also winning the prestigious Nationals at Indianapolis in 1979.
One of my best friends was named Annette, and his brother was racing at San Fernando Raceway, and we went out to help him push the car around. As soon as I touched that roll cage, that was the day that started everything for me. Drag racing was the greatest thing in the world, and Annette's brother was a guy named Don Prudhomme. For me tonight, the important thing was not to talk about what I've done. It's the people that I've run with, the car owners and the crews that got me there, that got all of us here. Tonight, I'm lucky to have a couple of great friends, Spider Razan being one of them, Sonny Diaz being another one, Mike Kinney being another one. They were with me the whole way, championship years and everything else. And without any of our crews, we wouldn't have got anywhere. So I thank everybody tonight for being here, for honoring all of us, and to my crews. This trophy is shared with all of you.
Our next inductee is Royce Fawsett, and he was a chassis builder supreme. And he really shined back in the 60s when we had these slingshots like you see right here. And this was the day that it was real tricky to build these cars because they had to have a flex because they didn't have suspension, and that was the only way you could get the traction. We didn't have all the magic clutches and everything we have today. Everything depended on how this chassis flexed to get those rear wheels to stick going down course. Roy was a master at it, and we'd like to congratulate him for being inducted into the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
It's my distinct honor tonight to induct into the Hall of Fame the individual whose last name has been mispronounced more than anybody in the history of drag racing, Royce Fawsett. Roy's father was the musical director for Paramount Studios in Hollywood, California during the heyday of the Hollywood system. But being a Valley guy, San Fernando Valley, California, he got fascinated with cars. He had natural talent for things like welding, fabrication, but more importantly, he invented things that other people never even thought about. He ended up actually building a lot of components for race car chassis that were used by every professional chassis builder, not only in the country but around the world. In his later years, he morphed from drag racing to land speed racing at Bonneville, where he became a member of the 200 Mile an Hour Club and ultimately became president for many terms and built it into a highly respected organization. Roy gave me two of the very most important things in my life. He gave me a ride in his Bonneville car that ultimately got me membership in the Bonneville 200 Mile an Hour Club. More importantly, he gave me my best friend, my wife, his daughter, Kathy Fawsett Olson.
I knew that he probably wouldn't be well enough to attend the banquet, so I asked him what he wanted to say. He said, "I feel very fortunate to be born when I was, because I got to be able to start at the beginning of drag racing and street rodding. I started a chassis building business, and I built 225 dragsters all by myself. Roy was really looking forward to tonight's ceremony, and we were trying to figure out if we could Skype it live. He passed away 3 weeks too early." Sorry. Okay. So on behalf of my father, my family, I thank you for this honor.
When we come back, the world's fastest shop teacher takes his place in the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
Gary Densham was a shop teacher in California, wanted to go funny car racing. He raced for many years on his own, but then John Force picked him up and he became part of the Force team. And then he really showed his merit. He won the U.S. Nationals, become the only shop teacher in the whole world to win a U.S. Nationals in a funny car.
What's the criteria to be inducted into the Drag Race Hall of Fame? And I think at the end of the day, it's just that you need to do things to show people what's possible. You could tell talking to Gary that he's a teacher, because when he talks, Gary has this effortless way of painting a complete picture about something. When he describes something, in your mind, you're already there. And what I love, Gary will say 3 or 4 times during the conversation, to make a long story short, and Joanne, you'll back me up on this, they ain't been a single time that he's made a long story short there. But I so appreciate getting the opportunity to hear those stories of things that I was just a kid and you got to experience. Here's a guy that raced a A-gas supercharged car. You know, think about the blown wheelies and Austins and Bantams back in the day, and did that for several years. And I know the bio says he started racing funny car in 1971, but that's when he actually built his own car. He's actually been racing a nitro funny car since 1970. So 48 years later, at 71 years old, Gary Densham's the guy that shows us, when grit, mettle, and determination meet intelligence, perseverance, and humility, what's possible on a drag strip.
I've got a couple notes, and I'll try and make a long story short. First of all, I want to say I don't know why I deserve this, but if it was given away for the person that's had the most fun in this sport, I should have been the first recipient, not this many years later. I was in Southern California racing my car. I'd had a funny car for a few years. And I started looking at the fact that we had lost Lyons, we had lost Irwindale, and I figured this sport of NHRA drag racing was going to be washed up in a couple of years, and I ought to be able to say I went to Indianapolis. So I loaded up my old Chaparral trailer on my Chevy pickup, and off down the road I went, and I'm thinking to myself, man, this is a long drive. And I'm in the middle of Oklahoma, and we're driving along. It's raining so hard that the windshield wipers will not keep up. And we're going 30 miles an hour on the freeway, and I'm thinking I'm never going to get to Indy. And I'm listening to KCOW, K-Cow, moo. And about that time, the guy comes on, we got news and weather coming up. Well, first of all, you got to listen to 15 minutes of Hog Futures and Farm Report. And then they tell us the news of what's going on. And the guy comes along and says, okay, now for the weather. He says, it's a beautiful day out there today. Bring your family out, have a picnic, do everything else. That minute, drove right by K101 K-Cal with all the antennas. And if there would have been an off-ramp, I would have went back there and knocked on the door. Look out the damn window, it's pouring. We got to Indianapolis, rained half the weekend, fought off mosquitoes. But what I want to tell you most isn't so much with anything that Gary Densham's ever done for the sport of drag racing, but what the sport of drag racing has done for Gary Densham. I've raced in Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, Alaska, Canada, every part of the United States. And the friends and the people that I've met there and the experiences and the places I've seen could have never been bought, no matter how much money I would have ever made, if it hadn't have been for NHRA drag racing. I want to thank everybody that helped me, and obviously, 50 years in this sport, I'd be here till 4 o'clock in the morning if I had time to thank everybody that really helped me. Thank you very much now.
Back in 1962, my dear deceased wife used to drive this car, and she won quite a few trophies with it. So Mopar decided they ought to have a Pat Garlits Memorial Award. This year's recipient is Terry Chandler, and she's made a lot of contributions herself. She funded 2 funny cars with Make-A-Wish on one and Infinite Hero on the other, and she paid all the money to fund those cars. And the fact of the matter is, she passed away recently and left money for those cars to continue to run, which is unbelievable. So tonight, she is a recipient of the Pat Garlits Memorial Award from Mopar.
Could I get all the Make-A-Wish and Infinite Hero funny car teams, will those crews please stand up to show the measure of the mark that Terry Chandler has made out there? Quite literally, these 21, including myself, would not be here if it wasn't for Terry Chandler. She's ensured that we're able to be out here and pursue our dreams and passions. And her husband, Doug, is not a drag race fan, but he recognized Terry loved this sport and the people in it so much, he couldn't let that go away. And because of her passion and her heart for this, Doug said, we're going to continue doing this.
I used to go up on the starting line all the time and walk up there, and the first thing she said was, what was his light? That's all she wanted to know about Tommy and Jack was, what was his light, you know? So I do miss going up there. I miss her watching you guys like a hawk, and I know y'all miss her, so we'll just keep on keeping on. Thank you.
Innovation, safety, and winning. 3 words that sum up Herb Fischel's career. The longtime director of racing at General Motors receives this year's Founders Award.
It is so gratifying for me today to see all the drivers walk away from these horrific crashes, thanks to the program that was initiated back in the early 90s. My greatest ability was to pull together the right people to get things done and then go win the race. Very simple objective for me was to win. So as you depart tonight, whether it's by land, sea, or air, I ask you to remember one thing. Always enjoy the ride. Thank you.
And we hope you enjoyed the ride tonight. Thanks for watching. This has been a presentation of Masters Entertainment Group.